everybody, happy Friday. It's me, John, again, and we are here with another edition of BrainScratch. And this week I'm going to go into one of the most requested topics that I've had since I've started doing these videos and taking suggestions from all of you. Speaking of which, if you have any other suggestions, please feel free to put them in the comment box below. I was a bit leery about going into this topic because I know it's a big one, and it strikes a very personal chord with a lot of people. If you were ever a fan or are a fan of the band Nirvana, this is definitely going to pull at you in some way or another, because I feel all of us can resonate with the memory and thoughts associated to losing Kurt Cobain in 1994. And I was just out of high school. I graduated actually in '93, and being in high school around the time that Nirvana really popped really drove it home for me. I can literally remember the first time a friend of mine showed me the video for Smells Like Teen Spirit, and it was like everything changed. It was like this is a whole different new type of rock. This was something that we had been dying for, coming out of the 80s kind of glam rock, glam metal, makeup and big hair thing that was going on, and it was desperately needed. And Kurt Cobain was really someone that broke through a mold on a few fronts, not just in terms of really being able to create some amazing music, but his lyrics, if you would go into his writing and actually understand it, he was just kind of this type of genius that we don't get a whole lot. And I think that's why so many people hold on to Kurt and his memory and keep looking into this case even as much as we are. That being said, I was a bit shy about approaching this subject because there does seem to be this thing with when we lose a major star, these conspiracy theories that kind of come up around it. And like, there's people that still want to believe that Elvis is alive and he's, you know, eating peanut butter and banana sandwiches on an island off of Hawaii or something. You know, Jim Morrison, we saw this. Even with Michael Jackson, there's tons of conspiracy theories about the fact that Michael could still be alive living in Canada, I think is what I've been hearing on that. So I was a little leery to look into this, but there's a ton of information on this. This story and the conspiracy around it has been featured on Unsolved Mysteries, major news sources all over the place, and there's pretty good reasons for that, and we're going to get into that. First off, there's also a film called Soaked in Bleach, which was just released this year. It is now available on Hulu. If you're a Hulu Plus subscriber, you can watch it for free. I checked it out myself. And it is coming to Netflix on November 15th, 2015. So if you're seeing this video after then, you can jump right over to Netflix and check out Soaked in Bleach. I have to say, it's very comprehensive. It includes a lot of expert testimony. And one of the most compelling things is that they have the chief of police for the Seattle PD, who's now retired, but saying if he was still doing that job, that he would absolutely order that this case be reinvestigated with the evidence that is brought up in that film. And primarily, that film is based on a lot of information by Mr. Tom Grant. And Tom Grant is a private investigator, used to be a sheriff, I believe a Los Angeles County sheriff, if I'm remembering correctly. Had a very good career and decided to become a private investigator, and one day he gets a call from Courtney Love, and this happened to be on Easter Sunday. So Courtney Love is saying that she believes someone could be using Kurt's credit card, so she's been trying to get that shut down. And then when he goes to meet with her, all of a sudden it kind of changes, and the story is more about, well, actually Kurt's missing and we need to find him. And that's pretty much the tone of a lot of what Mr. Grant has dealt with throughout this whole thing. Essentially, his interface to this story is Courtney Love, and if you go through his evidence and watch the film, you will also come to the feeling, or possibly the understanding, that Courtney is either manipulating him for some reason. she's caught in several lies, and he's very good about keeping track of testimony. He records all of their phone conversations. That's one of the great things about Soaked in Bleach, is they actually have access to all his recordings. And I haven't seen a documentary quite do it like this before, but they use the audio from the recordings, and then they have actors that are kind of portraying some of the scenes going on, and they have some very good caliber actors working in that. So it's definitely worth checking out. It's stuffed with information, and outside of that, I've been trying to do my own little investigation around this to try to get some sense of, is his theory really valid? Is there anything to knock it? And basically what you have are two stories. One is the official story from the Seattle Police Department, which is, this is a straight up suicide scene. And then you have Tom's experience, which is an experience of being manipulated, catching people, trying to deceive him left and right, him being played a lot like a pawn, and then ultimately trying to do the right thing in this situation over and over and over. He eventually strikes up a conversation and pretty good relationship with the entertainment attorney for both Courtney and Kurt. And all of a sudden, that entertainment attorney starts leaking even more information to Tom, basically supporting the theory that Courtney has something to do with Kurt Cobain's demise. So this is Tom Grant's website. It is called CobainCase.com, and we're going to refer back to it in a couple of places. But just to get started here, this is right off the front page of it. Here are just some of the things that we were never told. Courtney Love was facing a divorce. Apparently, both of them had called into their attorney at separate times, asking about different aspects of getting divorced. Kurt wanted to remove her from his will. Courtney was wondering if she could knock out a prenuptial agreement that she had apparently signed before they got married, and asking to find the meanest attorney that she could, a divorce attorney, which, if you are of the mind that Courtney could be involved, there's a lot of evidence and direct quotes from her that are recorded where she seems very concerned about the money, very concerned about what would happen to her popularity, the fact that she had an album that was just about to be released. She was very concerned about the fact that Kurt did not want to participate in Lollapalooza and was about to turn away over $9 million for doing that. But in another weird way, among that dialogue, you also hear this kind of competitive nature about what she could have done at Lollapalooza instead of Nirvana playing. Someone was using Kurt's credit card. One of Kurt's credit cards was missing when his body was discovered, and someone was attempting to use the missing credit card after Cobain died, but the attempt stopped when his body was discovered. Essentially, someone was still trying to use this credit card, even though Courtney had already deactivated it with the credit company. So, you know, there's a lot of times when we're talking about these cases and there's these kind of side effects that happen, and this is one of them where it might make you think twice about this being just a straight up suicide. If nothing else, you can now identify that a personal item that belonged to Kurt was taken from him out of his wallet at some point and is being used. And we can also verify that he actually used that same credit card to fly back just a few days before his supposed suicide. So within a matter of days of him flying back to Seattle, somehow someone else gets that credit card and they're trying to use it after he has expired, which definitely puts a little twist in my brain. Cobain was in fear of his life. The shotgun found at the scene was purchased before Cobain left for rehab in Los Angeles, not after. He fled the rehab as reported by misinformed media sources. Now, we're going to hit a little aspect of that a little bit later in our conversation, but there might be a reason why media sources thought that he had bought the gun after. There was no suicide note. This is a big point of contention, and we're actually going to review some of the text in the suicide note. But some people believe that the suicide note is actually a letter that Kurt was writing to his fans, possibly explaining why he wasn't going to perform Lollapalooza, or possibly explaining why Nirvana was breaking up, possibly explaining why he was no longer going to be making music. And it looks like the last several lines of that letter could have been written by someone else, and there's a couple of pieces of evidence that might support that. Courtney had another note she kept in secret. This kind of pushes back towards, if nothing else, it seems like Courtney's view of reality is kind of skewed, and it almost feels like she is trying to manipulate perception of what happens to her. There's a couple of cases in the film Soaked in Bleach where you will literally just shake your head and go, did she really say that? How could that have happened and no one's noticing? It's strange because if you think about it now, considering she might have been facing divorce, she had a prenuptial agreement, she probably wasn't going to make off with nearly the amount of money that she did by inheriting essentially Kurt's estate with having him kill himself, which is in the upwards of, I think it's coming up on being worth $500 million, and they're projecting it could even continue to grow into the future. So there is definitely motive for her to be involved in his demise in some way. So Cobain was injected with 3 times a lethal dose of heroin. And this raises a big question for a lot of people because they're wondering, if he knew that he was trying to OD himself on heroin, why would you shoot yourself? It also raises some questions in terms of how can you inject yourself with that much heroin and still be functional enough to pull off a suicide attempt. If you've seen footage of people shooting up heroin, first of all, it's very gnarly to watch, but if you do check it out, they typically fall almost like they've gone to sleep or like they're passing out, and that's just a normal heroin user. If you're injecting yourself with 3 times of a lethal dose, I'm pretty sure that that's going to incapacitate you pretty quickly. Also worth noting, on some of the information that Tom was able to shake out of the police department, which hasn't been a whole lot, it does appear that there was a puncture mark on each of Kurt's arms. And if you know how the body works and how blood flow goes through your body, essentially shooting up in both arms is going to make sure that it hits your brain exceedingly fast. So I really don't know. There's some experts that are saying he might have had a minute or two to pull off the suicide after he did the injections. Other people say it would have been a matter of seconds and he would have been out and he would have been incapacitated. And likely would have died from the dose that he had taken. So once again, we're back to that question, why are you going to shoot yourself in the head if you've taken a lethal dose? If you ask Google with a simple search, who killed Kurt Cobain, well, it comes back pretty plainly. Courtney Love. Recently, a new Cobain murder conspiracy documentary has been making the rounds entitled Soaked in Bleach. The film alleges that the Nirvana frontman did not commit suicide, but was rather murdered by his wife, Courtney Love. And that's actually from a website called consequenceofsound.net. And I can tell you, after watching the film for myself, that is not what the film alleges. It does allege that she had some involvement in possibly setting up who killed Kurt, maybe paying them, maybe helping some of the pieces fall into place. But she was clearly in Los Angeles, which some people could look at as seeming as she was trying to drum up an alibi. She was in LA when he was in Seattle, and no one disputes that. That being said, I've seen some smaller websites that are literally trying to put together theories that Courtney literally killed Kurt herself. That does also raise a question about the suicide note, because we're going to get to it a little later, but some people think that Courtney actually wrote the bottom of the suicide note. And if she did that, did she send it back to Seattle? There was a friend that was traveling with the investigator, Tom Grant, a close personal friend of Kurt's. Is it possible that the letter went with him to be placed at the death scene? There's a few different ways to look at that. So I also went looking for information on possibly theories why he wasn't murdered, supporting the suicide idea, the official conclusion. I didn't find a whole lot, but I did find this one website, alternativenation.net, and they have an article, 10 Reasons Why Kurt Cobain Wasn't Murdered. Let's go through a couple of these. None of Kurt's bandmates, family, or friends believe that he was murdered. That's a little bit debatable. The entertainment attorney that I mentioned earlier, she also is a godparent of their child, Francis, Francis Bean, I believe. So I think that's pretty close to family. That's definitely someone that I would consider in the friend realm, and she was actively helping Tom Grant with his investigation. He was recording those conversations, and it's pretty clear in there that she is thinking that something possibly happened to Kurt that was not just a suicide, and that others were lying to cover it up. 2 of Kurt's uncles committed suicide by self-inflicted gunshots to the head. If you watch the documentaries I have in the description box below, you will find out that those stories are somehow being twisted. There are a couple of accidental deaths. Someone who, I believe he was a police officer, dropped his firearm and it shot him and he was killed. Another person was drunk and fell downstairs, and apparently those are the 2 deaths that are being now considered suicides. Kurt reportedly told a classmate that he was going to become a famous rock star and then kill himself in a blaze of glory like Jimi Hendrix. I don't know if you remember being in high school, but some kids talk like that. I really don't think that that's too big of a stretch. Kurt wrote in his publicized journal that he once tried to commit suicide by laying on train tracks only to have the train come down the wrong tracks. Kurt Cobain's lyrics were full of direct and veiled references to suicide. They go into several examples here. Nirvana MTV Unplugged, November 18th, 1993. To me, this was Kurt's planned epitaph 5 months before his death. If Kurt had taken a lethal heroin overdose, would he not be able to pull the trigger? Heroin addicts have increasingly high drug tolerances. I don't know, it's kind of a bit of a stretch for me. There was hardly any blood. If Kurt blew off his head, there would have been more blood. Apparently this gunshot was set up in a way so that it was not a heavy charge, it was a light shot, and several of the investigators have noted that it was not a particularly grisly crime scene. I even heard one say that there wasn't an exit wound, so I don't think, I think that point can actually be supported. Courtney Love hired someone to murder Kurt Cobain because they were going to get a divorce. Worth noting here, there is someone who was a lead singer for another band. I believe he goes by the name Eldon. His name is Eldon, if I remember correctly. And you can find videos of him where he's just straight up saying, Courtney Love came to me several months before this occurred and offered me $50,000 to kill Kurt Cobain. And obviously he didn't take it. He has apparently been put through a lie detector test, and he passes that lie detector test when making that statement. So there might be something to that thought. But I will have the link down below for alternativenation.net so you can check out these 10 reasons. There's something strange that I'm finding when I look into this case. For all the work that Tom Grant has done, most of it is based on him trying to understand Courtney Love and her motivations and why she says and does the things that she does and says. This website is trying to understand more of Kurt's motivations and trying to key him to being suicidal. One of the things that Tom estimates is that Courtney is trying to lay out a narrative that Kurt was suicidal, a narrative that is questionable. As a matter of fact, there was another incident supposedly in March where they had called the police. Courtney was at home in an argument with Kurt, and she told the police that he was going to kill himself. He had locked himself in a room. The police came out, and the guy that was on scene has now been interviewed, and he said, you know what, Kurt was not suicidal. He was in the backyard. He was embarrassed by the whole thing that was going on. Outside of that, in the documentaries, there is a lot of times where you will see that Courtney seems to be manipulating the media into thinking that Kurt was suicidal, and they're extremely questionable. People might also wonder, when she hired the private investigator and sent him to Seattle, she was very clear about them trying to find a shotgun. And either she was telegraphing that Kurt was going to use that shotgun that he had only bought a matter of days before. I believe he bought after she was already gone, and somehow she was telegraphing that that was going to be the instrument of his death. Was she right? Or was this her potentially showing her hand a little bit in terms of the plan that she was trying to develop, execute, and sell to the rest of the world?